Day 2003, and we are delighted to have Uncle Larry and Aunt Margaret here to talk about whatever they want to talk about. But we hope that we'll focus on the Twomblys, to talk about your father and mother, and even farther back than that, and talk about your brothers and sisters, and let's take it from there. So, Uncle Larry, let's start by telling us what you can remember, the farthest back from the origin of the Twomblys.
Well, I remember this one morning in 1929. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I was born.
You remember that?
Bawling like hell, you know, and I weighed 12 pounds.
Wow. And your mother was bawling like hell, too.
Yeah, my mother was bawling like hell. Anyway.
But you had a brother that weighed more than that.
Yeah, a little more than that.
Really?
Yeah. And Ralph, your father weighed about 12 pounds. We were all big. I don't know why. My mother wasn't that big.
But you were the sort of the second family of your parents.
My father was married before in around the year of 1917 or 18, and his first wife was named Spangler, and my mother was married at 15, and her husband was named Spangler, and they were actually cousins.
Oh.
And they both had 2 girls. My mother's first husband died of the flu epidemic during World War I.
And your mother's name is Mary.
My mother's name was Mary, and her full name was Mary Caldwell. And Dad's first wife died.
And your dad's name is Ralph?
Was Ralph, and his first wife died during the epidemic, the flu epidemic in World War II, and they both had 2 girls.
How old were they? I mean, how old was your mother?
Well, my mother was 15 when she was married. She had 2 girls. She was probably about 18 years old, or 19 when her husband died. Mm-hmm. And the epidemic was so great that people were dying by the hundreds. And he got sick, and of course, with the flu, and my mother got sick, and he died, and my mother was still sick, and they buried him the same day. And when she come around, she asked for Harold. His name was Harold, and they had to tell her he was dead.
Oh my gosh!
And they buried her without even waking him up, because they were so scared of the flu. Everybody's getting the flu. And if you go to the Jerusalem Cemetery at Pleasantville, you find rows of Spanglers and stuff there that died during the flu.
So they lived in Pleasantville?
Lived in Pleasantville.
And what did your mother's parents do, and what did your father's parents do?
My father's parents were farmers, and they teamed with teams. They had 2 or 3 teams, and they hauled logs and ties to the railroad at Tionesta, and also farmed. Well, then my grandfather and them decided to drill this. They owned 100 and some acres there, and they decided to drill it for oil, and they hit oil there. And then they was in the oil business for a long time.
Also, when my father told my mother that he was from oil,
yeah,
he wasn't actually wrong.
No, he wasn't actually wrong. Exactly right. But it was a very.
I'm not sure that's what my mother.
It was on a very small scale.
Yeah.
But that's what they, and I was born in the same place my father was, which is called the Temperance House.
Why was it called that?
Because at that time it was built during the oil excitement, and it was called the Temperance House because it was a hotel really, and there was no booze sold there. Across the road there was a hotel, but it's all gone now, of course, and they sold booze. They called it the hotel. The Temperance House still stands, by the way.
Mm-hmm. We toured that, I think,
yeah,
last.
it still stands.
Yeah.
Still stands on it.
So how old were your parents when they met?
Well, I think they I don't know, but they were in their early 20s, and I do have a picture of them going on their honeymoon, and they had a Model T Ford. And they were going on their honeymoon and standing by this open tour. There was no top on the car, open tour car. They were going to Niagara Falls. Happened.
And they each had 2 daughters.
They each had 2 daughters.
And who were these daughters?
My mother's two daughters. One was named Esther, the other was named Bernice. And my father's was Ruth and Beatrice. And Ruth was raised by my grandparents. And Beatrice was raised by her grandmother. My father raised my mother's two daughters.
I see.
Raised them. The other ones they weren't adopted. They just the grandparents raised them on it.
So when you were born, you had then two older half sisters.
I had four.
Four, but two that lived in the house.
Yeah, two that lived in the house. Yeah. Actually, they were distant cousins, but yet they were half sisters to me.
So is there some weird genetic thing going on in the Twomblys with marrying cousins and so on?
No, there wasn't. There was no. As a matter of fact, the one girl, my dad's one daughter, married my full uncle, and there were no relatives.
I'm gonna have
Because
to
my
think about this one
dad's
for a while.
first wife was no relative of, and neither was my dad of my mother's brother. But her daughter married my uncle, George. But there was no relatives, nothing there. Maybe sometimes we ask screw, but it might be, but we don't recognize it. But it's not. There's no marriage of cousins or anything like that.
Now, how much older were they than you when you were born? What was the age difference?
Well, I was born in 21, and my father was born in 1899.
Oh,
So it wasn't much, 23 years.
Yeah.
And so Bernice and Ruth and the other two, how much older were they than you? How many?
They were only, it wasn't very 2 or 3 years older.
That's
Bernice
all,
was
yeah.
the oldest. See?
Oh, yeah.
And they were close because, two persons having different babies, they were real close. They were at age. And it wasn't long after that, that my mother and dad got married.
So talk about your early memories of growing up. I mean, what was it like? You grew up in Pleasantville. What was it like?
Mostly in Pleasantville. Actually, I have a very good memory of Sand Hill. That's over by Ute, where we lived, where I took you in the bus, remember?
Right.
And I have very good memories of that. And I was taken over there when I was only a few weeks old. And the school was about a mile, so when I got to go to school, we walked it. Everybody, there was no school buses. And we walked all that. But I remember on the lease very well. As a matter of fact, all these years, it goes back to seem like it's my home. I mean, that's where I was from, really. And then we moved from there. My dad pumped these 3 leases, what we call leases and pumpings, and they run 24 hours a day. And that was to keep the pressure on the oil, to force the oil and gas out. Well, then they decided, my uncle, my grandfather, and my dad, because oil was about $5 or $6 a barrel, which was a lot of money then. And they had a chance to buy these oil wells or oil leases in Oil City and in a place called Rouseville. And my grandfather already had some at Pleasantville, where I was raised. And they went into business in 27. And they bored about $100,000 in 27.
Wow.
The Depression came on in 29, where oil went down to less than $1 a barrel. They kept pumping and doing things to pay the mortgages, pay the thing on it. And they finally was able to sell everything. It took a few years to do it, 6, 8 years or longer, but they finally was able to pay it off. And my grandfather, I think, had $2,000 when he retired. When he died.
Oh.
So they was able to salvage that, so he didn't have to. But
So they really had their own kind of oil business.
Oh, they did. Sure, they did.
What was? Do you remember the name? Did they have a name?
No, they're just the Twombly oil.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still out there by where the Terra Farm, what we call it. It's called, some of the wells they would call the Twombly wells, because they were drilled by them. Now, I was born at the Temperance House, and so was my dad. And we lived there a while. Well, it had 2 wings, just like this here house, only smaller. It had 2 wings. It had the main thing and the rooms and stuff, and upstairs was a hotel. So my grandfather owned that for a long time, and they decided that there was a house over, and the house still stands, over the hill. Would be about, at least 2 miles through the fields and stuff. They took the wing, they cut the wing off that one side, and they rolled this wing, part of the house, 2-story, for about 1.5 miles on logs,
And created another little house?
and put it up against the other house to
Oh, I see.
make it bigger. And it's still there. And it's still there just exactly. And the way that they do it, they cut these logs, and they put them, laid up, and they had the teams, 2 or 3 teams hooked onto the house. And they would take and pull that house over on the logs. And then they'd go back and pick up these logs and put them up again, and then roll the house. That's how they rolled it. It was too heavy to slide it. So they rolled it. And actually, that's about what they did with the pyramids, all this stuff, when they moved stuff. But they moved that all the way over there. And the sign called the Temperance House is in the Great Museum,
Oh, really?
because it was a famous landmark. And when I got it over there, the one man said, "Well, that sign was still up there," and they took it out down to the museum.
So
Good.
where was Ralph born?
He was born at Sand Hill,
Okay.
at the oldies, Sand Hill there. That's where Ralph was
Well,
born.
Charles was born there too, wasn't
And
he?
Charles born there, he did, but
How old was he when he died?
who
Charles.
he died at birth.
And this is before Pop was born?
No.
This is after
No,
Pop?
yeah. He was healthy. He was just large, and the blood vessel broke in his brain or what they were
Oh,
doing.
wow.
He weighed 13 pounds.
So you had 2 brothers.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
never knew that.
yeah.
And
Charles,
so,
yeah.
so you're the oldest, and
Yeah.
Jenny was born next?
Jenny was born in a little place called Nealtown outside of Pleasantville. And we was all born at home, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
We were all born at home, at midwives. My aunt mostly was there.
With your mother screaming because of large babies?
I don't know, I wasn't there, but anyway. But we were all healthy, and we were all born at home, everyone else.
So what is the age difference between you and your siblings?
I mean, between me and Jenny was 3 years.
And Jenny?
Your dad was 2, your dad and I was about 3 years. We would go like, say 50, 51, and 52. And then we would change a little bit, but we'd be 3 years, a year apart, a little over a year apart difference was all.
Oh, so Jenny was a
Between
year
Dad
from you,
yeah,
and then
Jenny was,
and then-
I
but
was
Betty
first,
was
Jenny
much-
was next,
younger, right?
and then Betty was much younger. She was much younger,
Mhm.
yeah. She was born in Old City.
Uh-huh.
I remember she was born real well.
So how old were you before you left Pennsylvania? Wait, Oil City's in Pennsylvania, right?
I never did leave Pennsylvania.
Right.
I'm the only one.
I'm
that-
thinking of Canton, Ohio, but that's
No,
long
the folks
time.
moved out, he moved
Yeah.
out there to work in the shop, the steel shop.
Talk about your dad's personality. What was he like?
Dad was a very easygoing man, very easy. Now, if we boys needed whipped, he could do that, but never viciously.
Yeah.
Dad was an easygoing man.
He was very tall, wasn't he?
He's tall, he's big, yeah, Dad was 6 foot or better. And at one time, he got to 275, but he wasn't sloppy fat. Dad was a big, powerful
They
man.
called him the bear? Or?
Yeah, they called him the bear, but he was a big man. But he was not a vicious man at all.
He had a good sense of humor and he
Yeah,
loved children.
Great humor, that's Margaret. He could clog, he could dance,
Well-
he loved parties,
Margaret, chime in.
yeah.
Talk about him.
Yeah, Dad was a nice man. And it's a funny thing about today, they say, well, you shouldn't spank your kids, which I know, there's nothing wrong with that. But it's funny, we boys do something, we get spanked, we knew exactly why we got spanked.
Right.
We knew exactly what it did. We cried
that
like hell,
alter-
but we still loved our father and mother, My mother was real easy, she wasn't,
She never did spank you, did
no,
she?
as I remember, I think I can remember saying, if you behave or something, I'll tell Dad. Well, that quiet us right down, we do it.
Well,
But
talk
we were
about your mom.
still boys,
What about your mom? What was her personality like?
She was another person, was real, just a nice person, She was nothing vicious about my mother at all.
She worked, didn't she?
She was a postmistress
Yes.
in Pleasantville during the war.
I didn't
She became
know.
postmistress.
Yes, she was.
Yeah, she was there. Yep. But she was a very nice lady. She didn't have anything to say bad about anything or anybody. I'll tell you how powerful my father was. I was, I think, about 17. I know I was because I was in my last year of high school. And Dad was caretaker. He got to be caretaker on the road. He had charge of so many miles on the road, and he had so many men work for him for the state.
You're doing what? Caretaking?
Yeah, he's caretaker. He was the boss of so many roads at that time. That's the way they
Oh.
worked it. So you'd have a bunch of men on on the township roads or something, and then somebody would be the boss. And Dad was boss over this.
Oh, so
section
he
road.
switched from
Yeah.
working in the oil
Oh yeah,
fields
because there was
to-
no when we left Oil City, so they sold out. But anyway, the tire went bad on his Ford truck, and on the Ford truck at that time there was a straight axle. And I said, I'll change that because I liked to do it. So I went up, and it was a good thing it was dirt up at the garage. I was outside, and I jacked the truck up on one side, and I put a piece of stove. I took the wheel off on one side and put a piece of stove wood under the damn thing. And so I went on the other side and jacked it up. And I reached up and pulled a cotter key to take the tie rod off and pull the truck around. The truck laid right across my head here, the axle.
Ow.
The only thing that saved me that it made impression in the ground. And I knew, like, it just like, I don't know, I knew what was going on. And my sister, because we had an outdoor toilet, by the way, and she come up there and she looked under my feet and she said something to me. And I thought I was hollering, but I wasn't because the pressure was so great. Well, she knew there was something wrong, so my brother-in-law was married to my sister Bernice. He was a little short fella and a powerful guy. So they come running up there to my dad and them in the afternoon, and Tony said, "You grab a hold of one side and I'll grab a hold of the other." And my dad said, "No, you pull him out." He picked that pickup truck. He didn't know he picked it all by himself.
Wow.
Picked it up off of me. He said he never could have did it, otherwise. He didn't even think anything about it. He just picked it right up. They pulled me out. Well then, they called the ambulance. They thought that I was done. I had a big hole behind my ear.
Oh,
And, but it smashed the mastoid, but I never had a bit of trouble.
really?
Except my side of my head was numb for about 6 months. It smashed the nerves, I didn't shut out and stuff. And this arm had pulled period from the socket. So I carried a pail of stuff around getting strength back in that, getting it back in. And all the kids saved all the tests for me, because I was pretty dumb in school. And they saved all the tests for me. The teachers did say, "Damn, where they give them all me a copy," and I graduated. But it was my last year in school when that happened.
So what, now you two had met by that point in high
No,
school?
no, it was later.
Tell us that story. How did you meet?
Well, I'll tell you the truth, but she won't, but I'll tell you.
Let's have your version then, Aunt Maggie. I want to hear yours.
When I was a boy, I worked at the quality markets in Pleasantville. As a kid, when I was going to school, I was school on Saturday. Well, then when I got older, I got out of school, I went down and I was working at the quality market, a meat market in Titusville. And another fellow and I were there behind the counter, and we were working in the meat market. And she came in. I don't know what the hell for. She said she'd come in with some bologna, and I was what she
I'd
got.
come in to buy a chicken from
The
Mr.
chicken,
Locke.
and that's what I got. That's what she got. She said it was me. But anyway, I didn't know who the guy was, and he said, "I don't know." So I said, "Well, I'll be back after bed." I took my apron off and ran out and followed her right down the street. And I told her, talked to her and told her who I was. She said, "Yes, I had a date with your brother, but he didn't keep it." So she knew Ralph before she knew me.
So Ralph,
And the reason Ralph didn't keep it is Larry wouldn't let
I
him have
wouldn't
a
get in my
car.
car.
when did you know that Pop had a date with Maggie?
No, I didn't know. He never mentioned it. He had a lot of dates. Your dad did. He didn't. But anyway,
Tell us
so
about that.
I said, she went, I said, "I'll give you my watch, everything." I said, "I'll keep the date," which I didn't have to give her my watch, but
How
I
old were you?
kept the date.
I was 19.
19, I was 20. Yeah.
And so that was that?
That was it. She had a boyfriend, and I got the word around that she was my girlfriend now, and he went to take a walk, so I never seen him after.
So how long did you date before you married?
Not too long.
Not too long.
Probably about 3 months.
3 months, I think.
Seriously?
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
truth.
So,
Love at first sight?
well, I don't know, but anyway, it's been going on for 60 years. But But anyway, we did. We got married 3 months. And her dad we ran away and got married because he
Oh,
didn't
you
have
didn't
anything to
have
do
a
with
big
it because he
church.
wanted her to marry Basil Hummer, who lived next door.
Basil.
Yeah, and had a big farm. And he wanted to join because he was, he had 600 acres. He wanted to be a
Baron.
baron out there, see? And a guy from out on the other side of Pleasantville I'd never heard of come in and marry somebody. Nobody married anybody out in there because it was all Kerrs, Hummers, and Hasbroucks. And they all married each other.
So you're on the Ritchie side of town, is that it? You're on the right, you're the landed gentry?
Yes. Aunt
Well,
Margaret.
it was really farmland.
Uh-huh.
But
Oh,
Aunt,
yeah,
a lot of
a
farm.
beautiful dairy farm. Oh, yeah, all farm.
but Aunt Margaret came from a very fine, upstanding,
Yeah,
hardworking
that's right.
family.
Who was that guy comes out on the other side of Pleasantville, never heard of him before, and coming in here, boy, he was not happy.
So you actually climbed out the window and ran away to get married?
No, I was working in town.
No, she was working in town.
Did you pack a bag beforehand? Was there a lot of thought in this, or just spur of the moment?
We got married in Dunkirk, didn't
Well,
we? No,
no, Ripley.
Ripley.
Ripley, New York.
We went to her uncle, he's a minister, he wouldn't marry us. No,
He's
no.
awesome.
I was gonna have trouble with the family, no way, he was gonna.
But we were already married. We got married the night before.
Yeah, but he wouldn't have married us.
This sounds very romantic.
We got married
What?
about 11 o'clock at night, didn't we?
Yeah,
We got the preacher and his wife out of bed. She was still in her nightgown.
I gotta tell you something funny. We went to the motel or whatever, and I had the wee-wee, and I was so damn bashful for her to listen to me wee-weeing in there. I forget whether I sat down or I ran it down my leg or something, but I didn't want her to hear me wee-wee, and I can remember that. She just like that, you know.
Well, we
And
won't
I
ask
wait-
you what happened later.
Yeah, well, that later to come natural, but you know, I didn't want that, that splashing, you
And
know.
I
feel ever
had to
was.
put my hair up in curlers, and I had to wait until he went to sleep. Then I got up, put my hair up in curlers, and I took it out before he got up,
Oh, yeah.
before he woke up the next morning. It wasn't dry, and my hair was a mess.
So it lasted one night, huh? That
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
one night.
deception.
Honeymoon's over. We went to Niagara Falls for a honeymoon, and while we were there, it was during the week, and we were standing there, and pretty soon this woman comes floating down the river and went over the falls. We was the first one to see her.
Well, you mean,
She
was
jumped
she
in the-
supposed to? No, she jumped in?
She
Yeah,
jumped in.
she
There was a
jumped.
little bridge up above on the American side, and she
Oh,
jumped
my
off from there.
gosh.
It meant suicide. And we're standing there where it goes over the railing, and there she's floating. And she raised up before she went over the falls, and over she went.
Yeah, and Dummy was going to try to save her.
Well,
I
you know,
grabbed
we
a hold
didn't
of his
call her son,
coattail.
but I would have been right over too, but the cop come over then and told us that they did know where there's cables, that they would grab it. They could grab a cable and go out there, you know, but otherwise it would have swept me right over the falls.
Wow.
So we watched that woman go.
So what was the date of your marriage?
It's up to her, I can't remember date.
Wasn't it
year?
August 19th,
August 19th?
Okay.
What
August
year?
19th.
1920, 23,
40,
42.
40, was
1942.
it 42? Yeah,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah, because I graduated in
Yeah.
41, married in
Yeah.
42.
So
Craig
the war
was born
was,
in 43.
Yeah.
the war was on the way.
Oh,
I mean, the
yeah.
war was on the
Yeah.
way.
That's
Yeah.
why the lady committed suicide,
Because her,
See, I was in
because she was depressed because of the war.
I was in the service when Craig was born.
oh,
So you joined after you got married?
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
I could join that, took it, man. Yeah.
Did you join or were you drafted?
I joined. I was gonna be drafted. I joined.
is that because?
And that's when he won favor in my dad's eye,
Oh, I was going to ask.
Yeah,
because my dad figured he'd get killed.
I had get killed and I had to pay
And that's solved that problem.
Yeah, and then that run along a lot of years and he had to accept, you know, things,
So tell us, you joined the Army, right?
Marines.
The Marines.
Marines, yeah.
And how long were you in it for? And did you
About 2.5 years before the war was over.
go overseas?
Yeah, I was over in Guam. Yeah.
What-
And I was an MP in Guam.
You were the MP.
I was in the MPs in Guam. We were setting up, at that time, our division, the 3rd Marine Division, was setting up to invade Japan. And we were being trained to set up, after they went in, we were setting up to control the public, the population. And we were told, they said, these people are fanatics. And that boy over there, 6 years old, with a rifle, will kill you just the same as a 20-year-old.
Mhm.
And we were trained to shoot them, which would have been a horrible thing,
Right.
But they didn't. They weren't fanatics. Once they were beat, they were beat,
Right.
And
So
we
you,
had no
you
problem.
didn't have to.
No,
Yeah.
didn't have to set up martial law or nothing. We didn't have to. They went in, and hell, people were quiet. I didn't have to go to Japan, but they were quiet. They didn't cause any problems at all.
Were you away when Craig was born?
I was away in Craig was born.
No, you weren't.
Was I home?
Sure, you shot your toe off. And so you were on,
Oh, we were out hunting, yeah.
Yeah.
We got hit, on the end of the toe.
Did you mean to shoot your toe?
God, no. I went right back in the Marines as quick as I could. Boy, they investigate the hell out of you. No.
Uncle Larry, you being the big brother, and you chose the Marines, why did Ralph choose the Air Force?
Because he couldn't make the Marines.
Ah.
Why
Flat
couldn't
feet.
he make it?
Him,
Flat feet.
him and Gus Carlson went in. They were great friends. And they wouldn't decide to join the Marines. And they went up. And they wouldn't take, they took Gus, but they wouldn't take Ralph. So Ralph turned right around and joined the Air Force.
But didn't he have to forge his birth certificate or do something like that? Didn't he join earlier than he was allowed to?
yeah, he
I
did.
think he did,
Mhm.
yeah.
He and Gus both did.
Yeah, they both did.
So
They were old,
was
they
how
were
old,
old
17?
enough to look in.
But you know why he didn't get in the Marine Corps?
Why?
Because he had flat feet
They wouldn't take him. But they took him right in the,
in the Air Force.
And that's where he became an avid man on flying.
But-
He loved it.
So how old was he when he joined the Air Force?
Only about 18 or...
Did he
No,
graduate?
17.
Did he
Huh?
graduate from high school?
Oh, yeah.
He
Mhm.
did.
Oh, yeah, he graduated,
He
sure.
graduated early.
Yeah. Yeah, he was pretty, I think Ralph was pretty sharp in school. Pretty smart.
Yeah, he was a lot smarter than you were.
Yeah.
Was
I
he?
never showed any like...
Was he a happy kid? Can you talk
Oh,
about
Ralph?
that? Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Was he ever? Ralph was more happy-go-lucky than I was, And the girls loved him. He had more girlfriends. Even when he was younger, he did. But
And they remembered him.
he's always older, always was a little bit older than what he really was. He could buy booze, he could buy anything, he'd get in trouble. Jesus, he was a kid, 16, 17. I'd have to go get him out of fights, for God's sake. Not out of them, just somebody telling me Ralph's in trouble, and I'd go over, But he wasn't scared of nobody. But the one time the cop gave him a big black eye. But it was down in a beer joint down in Oil City.
Are you good?
And he come home, and Jesus, he had a hell of a black eye. Well, that happened to you. Well, he didn't say much. But I found out about it, and he was down there in Oil City, and in there raising hell, and the guy was a cop. And his brother was with him down there too, I found out. And I worked at the shop at the time. I wasn't married. And they told me about it. And there was 3 guys from Titusville down there. And Ralph, I don't know what the hell he was doing, but he got going. Kolovich's name was smacked him. And this, he's a grown man, he's a cop. Craig, Ralph's only about 16, 17. So I finally found out who it was. And so the town I went, after the one guy, I talked to him, he backed way the hell off, and the one guy worked in the shop, and I went after him. That was his brother. And then I went after him, he said, well, I didn't do it. He didn't back off, this guy didn't, but then I went after his brother, the cop at night, and he was on duty, and he was standing in the doorway. You used to see cops. But now you don't. We knew him. We're always looking for him. I got myself in trouble, but now you get yourself in trouble. But I went up to him and I said, how'd you like to get me that? I challenged him right there, where he wanted it. He just looked at me. He said, well, Larry, he said, your brother asked for it. He said, you wouldn't calm down, you wouldn't do anything. He said, I just smack him. See? And I said, well, next time you try to smack me, don't you smack him. He's not old enough. You know, back then they would have had him arrested. They would no, it was just a scrap, see?
Right.
But somehow I wasn't going to bother my family, you know, and so it got over with. But it would have just been a scrap between him or I or something. Nobody would have went to jail, not even a cop. They wouldn't have. They would have just said, well, it's a scrap. But today, my God, you would have had they would have put you in jail, they'd have to do this, they would have do that. You
Investigate
know,
the cop.
it had a reputation, but not then. That was just one of those things growing up. Probably the other cops that would have thought, well, he deserved it, you know, something, but anyway.
So Pop joins the Air Force, was the Army Air Corps, isn't it?
Army Air Corps, yeah.
Yeah, at 17. And is it the case that the next time you see him, he's with Ilsa, or did you see him, I mean, once he left to go overseas?
No, I hadn't seen Ralph. I think I've probably seen him a couple of times, but then when I went overseas, I was gone for quite a while, and I hadn't seen Ralph for at least 2 years. I think at least 2 years. And I was discharged, and I was coming back, and I forget the name of this town, the big town where he was, and he said, I'll meet you there.
In Germany? You mean?
No, this was in the United States.
Oh, okay.
See, I hadn't seen him, because I never got over to Europe. But anyway, I got there, and I came in on a bus, and he met me, and we went up in a motel or hotel and stayed there, and we visited, and I went home the next day. Well, while I'm there, he said, I want to give you something. And matter of fact, I still have it. I think I'll give it to Steve. It's a little pistol that fits in my hand. You can't even see it. If I did like it, you couldn't see it. It's a little 22 short pistol. And he said, I want you to take that with you, because he said it's a little hot. I thought, well, so I said, what happened? He said, well, another fellow and I, he said, got a couple girls, went up to the motel. And he said, this fellow I was with had a girlfriend. And she found out where we were. So she comes up and she knocks on the door. And he said, I opened the door, and there she was. And that was his girlfriend, or the guy's girlfriend, not Ralph's girlfriend. And he said, she had that gun in her hand. He said, I slammed the door. And she fired into that door, emptied the gun.
Well, what was she trying to do?
Well, she was mad. That's her boyfriend in there.
Oh, I see.
She's mad because he's in there, see? And she shoots into the door. And so, well, Ralph said, I figured it was empty. I opened the door and grabbed the damn gun out of her hand. And he took it away from her, see? And somehow she got the hell out of there. But of course, at that time they didn't have cops all over, security things. But of course they heard the noise, what the hell's going on. And Ralph and them made some excuse about those holes in the door. But Ralph has a gun. So they want to find this gun. So it only happened 3 or 4 days before I got there. He gave me the gun, I still have it.
So what year was that?
Huh?
What year do you think that was?
Well, I was discharged in 45, so it was in 45. Mm-hmm. Then Ralph stayed in, and he had been training to be a fighter pilot. That's what he wanted to be, and they switched him over to bomber, and he didn't like that, so he got in trouble with his captain. He smacked his captain or something. That's why then he really got washed out. See, he come home on a 6 months, I think it was a 6 months leave. You could join up if you want, just rejoin. You didn't have to do anything. They'd give you that leave. Well, he met this fellow who was the head of the Asplin Tree Company in there. It was a good friend of mine. But he had a wife that liked boys, that liked men. And Ralph got acquainted with her. She was pretty sharp, I understand, but she loved men. Well, of course, her husband was a good friend of mine, and we'd go someplace, out and drink or something. Of course, Ralph would meet her. See? Well, finally, she wanted a divorce bill, and she wanted to marry Ralph. See?
Oh.
And Ralph told me, I don't want any of that. He said, I like her and everything, but not that. So he finally made up his mind, so I'm going back in, and then he got asked to go to Germany.
So he went back into the Army Air Corps to get away from the situation?
He wanted to go to Germany, so he asked to go to Germany. So she came in later, he told me, he said, don't tell her that where I went or something. I said, no. So she kept coming in, asking me about every day, where's Ralph? I'd make some excuse. And finally, she came after about a week, and she said, "He's left, hasn't he?" I said, "Yes, he has." I said, he just didn't want to get married, and he likes Bill, and he just didn't want to get tangled. So he went, and I said, "He's in Germany."
What was her name? Do you remember?
Polly.
Holly what?
Polly Hillard.
Hilliard, yeah. She was pretty sharp. As a matter of fact,
She was not.
she was.
She
To a
had-
man, she
She
was
was
pretty
white
She
trash.
had
She was
fat
pretty
cheeks.
sharp.
Fat cheeks?
Yes.
Well,
Fat face cheeks?
her husband,
Yeah, she
finally
looked
died.
like pork chops.
Nah, she was round and poorly, but she was, she was pretty sexy. And
I didn't think so.
I know you women wouldn't, but they had to watch her all the time. If we had a party, if Polly was there, and they all come, they had to watch Polly. So did we, but anyway, we weren't allowed to leave the room with Polly.
So
Right.
Pop went to Germany,
He went to Germany.
and he was part of the Berlin airlift.
Yeah, and he also helped ferry planes, I think, into Greece as a co-pilot or something. That's when they were having trouble with the communists in Greece or something taking over, and so they was ferrying planes down there and stuff. And also he was on the Berlin airlift. Now I'll tell you another thing he did. He was a great gambler, He loved to play poker, and he was a good poker player. He had sent my mother $2,000, which was one awful lot of money till he got out. And she was putting it because he was winning. He also won himself a car over there
In Germany?
in Germany. He got a car. He got into a game one night and he lost it all. And he had to send home the mother to get that money to pay that off.
So he was gambling on borrowed. Or
No, it was
Well,
his
no,
money.
he
He
got
didn't
he
have
had
the
the
money
money,
in
but he'd
hand.
sent a lot of it home. Well, he got into a game, he told me, where you had so much money, and if you ran out of money and you had the money in there, you couldn't go get some more money or borrow some money. That was it. See, and he got into a big game, and that was it. And he was there, and he couldn't bet any more on his cards because he didn't have the money to back it, and he lost it. He lost the car and he lost the money. Now, $2,000 was a hell of a lot of money back then. But he'd win it. He told me later, he said, I never could come back. He said, I tried and tried and tried. I never could come back on that gambling.
Well, let's skip ahead a little bit because I just want to clarify something. You're talking about Pop as a, bon vivant. I heard that he went to Alaska because he had some gambling problems in Atlanta. Is that right?
I never heard that.
Hmm.
He come to Pleasantville, and he played some poker, and he got some checks that were no good. And the constable came down to see me. You were living there at that time, see?
And
I knew the
took care of
constable.
it.
And I said, those checks are no damn good.
Hmm.
And I knew him, and I said, they're no damn good, they're gambling checks. And I said, you can't collect that, and you leave my brother alone.
Hmm.
He never pushed it.
Really?
Yeah.
So he went to Germany. He met my mother. What do you recall about it?
Well,
He didn't
well,
really tell your parents, did he, until he showed up, or he sent a letter?
No,
or something?
that's vague to me. I just can't, remember the exact things. I just know when her and Mike come over here, you talk about a couple, all of them, your mother, they were sad-looking people. They'd been sick on the
Back up to when we came over and when we first showed our little ugly
That's why I said,
faces.
when you
Yeah.
came in, you were
You
the,
couldn't speak a word of English.
you couldn't speak English.
And
And,
Mike looked as though, he looked like, you see pictures of these little orphans in Greece?
Yeah,
That's what he looked
With
like.
a swollen belly. And
Yeah, that's right.
just,
And big eyes.
yeah.
Really?
And there was people that lived there all their life. They thought Germans looked like, like hideous people, from all the war. They thought, but we found out you were actually human, There you come from Germany and everything. And of course, you
But you'd come
looked
over-
like, something drugged through it. You'd been sick and everything.
But you
and
come over
were-
on the boat and you were all sick.
Yeah, you were really welcome at home.
You
But boy, were you sad-looking
Well,
people.
what was your parents' reaction when Pop, he informed them, I think, by letter or something like that?
Oh,
Your
they,
parents'
Oh,
reaction
yeah,
that they
he
had
just-
married a German.
Right,
married a
he
German
didn't,
woman.
they didn't know anything about it until he was just about ready to come back.
yeah, no, I can't remember them ever saying anything,
Mm-mm.
Really?
No,
They
no,
didn't say, no.
I I think my mother had the impression that her being German was a problem.
No, I can't remember that at all.
No.
Well,
That's good.
no, I can't remember that. And your grandmother was a charmer.
My
She-
mother? No, your
Your grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
She come over here, you know.
Your mother's mother.
Yeah,
Your mother's
Monty, absolutely.
Oh,
She
yeah.
was a wonderful person, and she charmed her dad.
My dad loved her.
And he was a rough old thing, but he thought she was the most wonderful person.
Oh.
He liked her and the way she talked. He really, you know.
I didn't realize she came over. I knew she came when we lived in Atlanta, but she had come early.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't notice
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And we have her down here or what? But boy, we had her someplace down there because that's the only time your dad would have seen her. But he did.
Yeah, because we lived where we are now,
Yeah.
and she was up there.
Yeah, she just charmed him. Boy, he thought she was a charming lady. And she
She's
was.
funny. She's very
She
funny,
was.
wasn't she?
Yeah.
She was
Will
pretty.
thought she was really something. And she was a charmer. Yeah, she was. Yeah.
And so, how did they? They came to Pleasantville or Titusville and lived for how long? And what? I'm very sketchy myself.
Well, they went out. Was it Terra Farm we lived
No, they,
Or was it
up
top
at
of-
Colorado,
in? Oh, top of Colorado Hill. Yeah, they went there.
and they stayed there with your folks, or with your grandparents.
For how long?
Well, not too long
No,
because they
not
finally
very
got.
long.
Did they move into the chicken coop after that?
No, we
'cause-
came to Marietta.
I remember the chicken coop,
Oh, yeah?
so that was one of the visits.
I remember you moved up to Youngsville. To Garland. You lived in a place.
No,
up
but that
there.
was later.
Was that later?
You went down to Marietta.
Went to Marietta.
And that's because Pop was still in the.
That's right. He was still in
Yeah.
the service.
Mm-hmm.
So he just took some time out. He wasn't really working up in Titusville or Pleasantville.
No.
No,
It was just-
that's right. Then he went down there to Marietta, and he didn't fly the planes, but at that time he was a tester of motors or something. Take them out, and he tested the motors. And
You worked for a big aircraft company,
It
didn't you?
was I forget what it was.
Martin Marietta or something.
Something like that.
Mhm.
It was
Was it-
Lockheed at the time.
Lockheed, yeah.
That's right.
And in 1950, then I went down because your mother was pregnant.
With
And,
Mark, must be.
And Betty
Oh,
was
for you.
Well, I was born in
Betty,
51.
Betty was there, and I brought Betty and Mike home. I didn't bring you home, did I? Betty and Mike. Why was Betty down there? My sister Betty. But she was down there. Because I went down to get her, and I brought Mike, or did I bring you home with me?
I think you
Yeah,
brought,
you brought
Or
Mike.
three of them,
You brought Mike and Krista.
and Betty.
and
Yeah,
Betty.
Betty.
Yeah, because Betty was over, yeah. Betty was down there.
And then we went to Canton, Ohio.
Mhm.
Because I come home, when I was down there,
You
why-
went to Canton, Mike come to our place.
yeah.
My parents used to do that a lot, didn't they? Kind of farm us out over summers.
So
Well, occasionally
we
they
took
did.
care of you. We had your kids for a while at our house. Yeah.
I know you had me because I had my accident on Scout,
Yeah.
which I still have my
Yeah.
scar I'm very proud of. But, and I know Jerry and I spent several summers in Canton.
Yeah.
That's right.
But the one day or one morning, Ralph said, well, Ilse was having pains, and we jumped in the car. And then she's really having pains, and you were part of it. And you were the one who's causing it. And anyway, and we had to go through Atlanta to get to the vet's hospital. And I said, just open up the horns, he said, and if they get caught, the cops will take us on through. Well, we did have a cop that stopped us all the way through Atlanta, and I'm driving like hell. Not anybody. Well, anyway, we got in there, pulled in there, and I bet he wasn't in there 10 minutes. He came out, he leaned against the door. Oh my God! He said, "I only got one, but I got two," and that was you and Jerry.
Well,
Well,
Mark had to have been born by then, so he's a year older
Yeah.
than me.
And Mark stayed, and your folks kept Mark.
But I remember when it was because it was a 50 Buick. It was just a new 50 Buick. And then of course, You didn't have all these throughways, you know, he said that you had the Pennsylvania Turnpike at that time, but you didn't have these other ones, and there was over mountains and stuff like this here. And Betty was, what, 14 or 15.
Mhm.
So of course, I was the only one driving, and I said, sometimes I'll go to a little sleep and my eyes will be open, so you watch me, and if you think so, whack me. So we're driving along, I'm wide awake, and all of a sudden, Betty went, wham! Jesus, I burned her right the car. What the hell are you doing? She says, I thought maybe you went to sleep with your eyes open. I didn't go to sleep after that. I kept wide awake. But
So-
we drove all the way home, see, from there.
Wow,
You
all
know,
the way
we
to
just stopped, we just maybe stopped along the restaurant, we stopped at a restaurant or something.
But you took us to Canton. You took me to Canton, Ohio.
Yeah,
and Aunt Betty.
Yeah, that time,
Yeah.
you can't.
Well, talk a little bit about Mom and Pop, you know, with all their kids and the kind of life they had together. I mean, their children think that or believe that they had a very sort of romantic life. You know, they had problems, but that they
Well,
really...
I suppose we all do think,
Yeah.
you know, but there's one thing about it, you were never abused or nothing like that.
Oh, no. I
No.
mean, you know, they might have had financial problems or this and that, but that they really loved each other and had a very romantic
Mhm.
life.
He did. Financial problems really followed Ralph. I don't know why, but he did. He had a goal, and it's one thing though that he had the goal to become a flower once and he was going to do it, and he did it
Mhm.
without money. I know that. And he hated his shop. He came and you lived in that converted chicken coop, you know, and he went to work Cyclops, which he hated every morning.
Why did he come back to Pennsylvania? And we were in Marietta.
Well, Lockheed
Oh.
closed up or something.
Yeah, and he
He lost his job down there.
Yeah, and he came back home.
See, it was after the war,
Right.
He
and
went to
they,
work with Cyclops.
It was after 51, because that's where I was born in Atlanta.
Yeah. He hated that shop, and I don't blame him. I hated it when I worked at shop.
What was
too.
he doing?
I don't know what sort of work he was doing in there. Was a steel mill that he hated it, and I don't blame him. I hated it too, and that's one thing I told Greg. Greg, I don't care what you do. Don't go to work in a shop. You'll hate it.
Yeah.
And I did, and so did Ralph. And
it was he only worked there a year or so.
I know it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. He worked for me for a while. I worked
You
for
have
me.
you owned a used
I had no. At
now
that time
we
I
had the
had
garage.
garage.
a garage in a service station front end business, and he worked for me for a while on it. And then, for some reason or another, you moved up to Pittsfield,
Garland.
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 And I don't remember, just exactly the time in there when you moved up there.
See, I don't understand. Did we came from Marietta to Garland, and then did we go back to Marietta, and then
I
come
don't
to
think so.
Pleasantville? I
I
don't
think-
remember that. As
Well,
a-
all I know is I lived in my memory, lived in Pleasantville for 1 year. I was in first grade.
Yeah.
And
You
then,
didn't live there too long, maybe a year or so. Yeah.
but we might have lived there when we were younger.
But I think we came when Lockheed closed, or whatever it did. We loaded up everything because I had a dog that was loaded up in a big, we came up in a truck with big side bodies, and the furniture was all in the side bodies, and they put the dog right inside the side body. The dog rode on the outside. All the way up to Pennsylvania. We went to Garland.
Mm-hmm.
The dog was let out of the truck, and it ran away.
No.
Oh, for heaven's sake, I
All
didn't
of
know.
that for my dog to run away. It was my dog, of course.
I can't
Which is
remember
why you now
moved
have
to
four
Garland. There
dogs.
was nothing in Garland, and he wasn't working up there. I can't
can't
just
remember why
remember
they-
why
they were in Garland.
Well, we moved into a big 2-story house.
Right.
We
Mhm.
had a television, but no reception.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so these are the things a child would remember.
Mhm.
How
Yeah.
does Canton, Ohio fit in?
Well, that's where our grandparents.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
dad and mother moved out there, and he worked in a shop.
What kind of shop?
It was a steel mill.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So at some
Then they
point,
finally came back.
Hmm.
They were retired and came back.
so at some
But the
point,
reason they were out there was kind of Betty, by the way. See, Betty went out there. She went to college, and then she got a job out there at the Air Force.
oh,
And that's where she met Gene. He was a captain, or he was a lieutenant.
oh, I didn't know.
That's where she met him, and that's the reason the folks moved out there.
Mhm.
And so they moved out there.
But Aunt Betty took a lot of time with me. I remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was born in Marietta. Then we went to Garland, you say. Then we came back down to Atlanta, and then we moved back up to Pleasantville,
I
and then we
think
came
so.
back down again.
I think so. It was a two-time
Yeah,
trip.
I just can't remember how many times you did that.
I don't understand why we went back to Pleasantville in the chicken coop. I don't know.
And in the meantime, somehow,
Stephen was born.
Ralph got in because he knew airplanes real well. And more, he got in to fly for somebody or something.
In Atlanta.
Oh yeah, in Atlanta. That's what. Oh yeah, the insurance company.
Well,
mean,
yeah, he worked at Peachtree DeKalb Airport.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, he got in with this insurance company flying. Was it an insurance company?
I don't know.
It was a adjuster or something that had the plane, and he got in with that. That's where he got into Atlanta.
Mhm.
He got in with that outfit. And he flew for them. Then he had a chance to go with the company in Wellsville.
Right.
How was
Your
the meat
mother
doing?
loved Atlanta, and Ralph
Krista.
hated it.
How's the meat doing?
It dried out a little bit, but I put
Yeah.
some more water.
Okay, why don't you just turn the fire off?
Right, and we moved around a lot in
Yeah.
Atlanta, and I'm not certain why that was.
No.
It might have been these financial problems chasing Pop, but I don't think we lived in a place for longer than a year or two
No.
before we moved to another place. And he had, he did a variety of things. He sold cars for a while.
Oh yeah,
Because we got to ride around in a T-Bird.
yeah.
Remember that? He would trade a car for a cabin cruiser, so we had a cabin cruiser for a while. We had a sub shop for a while.
Mhm.
All of these things. He's,
Yeah.
you know,
But then he got with this company in Wellsville.
right.
But your mother did want to move. She loved Atlanta, and Ralph didn't like Atlanta at all. And he loved it up here because he was in the woods. He
Right.
was out there, and he worked for these fellas. He was a freelance guy, and that he loved. And then you lived in that apartment
Right.
Really?
And also,
before you bought the house.
so, this interview is not to talk about all the bad things that
No, no.
happened, but sort of to set the record straight. And maybe you know more about this than I do, and I don't know much, but wasn't there a point where Pop had an affair with a woman out
Yeah, he
west?
did. He did.
Mhm.
Your mother knew it.
My mother
She-
knew about it.
Mhm.
Did it
Your
always?
mother was a tough lady.
Yeah.
Most women would have, but I think the German
Yep, most
blooded
women are
her,
throwing their hands up a
says,
long
that's my
time ago.
husband, and she's not, and she just was a tough lady, your mother. That's all there was to it. We had great admiration for her.
She
To
wanted to
stick
keep
by
the
that.
family
Yeah,
together.
she just would not.
And is it that Pop, just his essential nature, he couldn't toe a straight line? Is that a...
Well, I don't know of any other one he ever did, but somehow he worked for this company, and she was a secretary. And that's how he met her.
And like we said once before, the women loved him.
Oh, yeah, and she was a nice-looking girl and everything. She'd been married before, I think.
Well, so was this... I was studying in Switzerland, so I
Yeah.
didn't really find out
Yeah.
much about this, but was this Pop's only affair?
As far as I know, really,
Yeah.
really, and I would have known. And
Well, how did they get back? I know he went out there and he lived for a while, and what made him decide to...
he was flying for this company out there, and that's why he was out there so
And
much.
it was out there that he got sick, he had that operation.
Was it a back operation?
No.
No.
Oh,
Diverticulitis.
Yes.
Mhm.
She was fine, but anyway, and then of course he got the racing out there, and she loaned him some money.
Oh,
I know that.
no.
Because when we were out there, they had busted up, and Steve was upset about it.
You mean my parents had busted up?
No,
Oh,
between him, and
Mhm.
she was out there. And she
One of
come
the
up,
races, yeah.
she come
I
up to
remember
the-
seeing her.
she come up to the plane. She was
Oh.
with somebody else down there, come up to the plane. Steve told her in no uncertain terms to get the hell out of it.
really?
He said,
And
we don't
she-
need you.
We don't like you, and we don't want you, and she left.
Wow.
But Steve laid the law down to her.
Mm.
Yeah, don't bother us anymore. She was a pretty girl. I met her, as a matter of fact. I drove Ralph and his wife's car out to Montana. Was her car, and I drove it out there. And on the way, it was away, and I stopped because Ralph told me, to call her. I called her, and she took me out to dinner. We went out to dinner on it.
Was she married?
She had been married.
Oh, I see. So how long did that whole affair last?
Oh, not that long. I don't. Well, a little while.
I don't think it lasted a year.
No.
Billy, Montana.
Yeah.
First we knew about it
That's
was,
right.
first I knew about it when I went out. I went out by myself for this race. Matter of fact, his first race, I think I was there when he ran his first race. And she was there at the hotel and stuff, and I met her and stuff like that too. And then Betty and Jean come out, and then Betty knew about it. She didn't really approve. She didn't approve what I would tell. But anyway, it got over. But I think Ralph, she'd give Ralph some money.
Did he ever pay it back?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But I know Steve put the kibosh on it, but he meant it too. She get the idea.
Aunt Maggie, I'm sorry.
Somewhere during there, he worked for Florida and took helicopter lessons and all.
Yeah, he took helicopter.
Coyotes and all that with. No,
He flew helicopter for this company on a gas line coming up in Maryland. And he said, you think you got hills and jungles? You think Maryland, and he dropped down in these places because that's where they were taking these tankers from Saudi Arabia with frozen gas and then putting it in the pipeline and then burying it down in Maryland. I mean, they put it in for storage. And he flew helicopter on that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And he-
This is why he was out west, by the way.
Right, yeah, that's.
Yeah, he was out west flying helicopter for mining for uranium, exploring. And what he was doing was flying over these ranches and over these canyons and stuff, and they had some sort of thing that they dangled or something that might show him this. And that's what he was doing for this company. And he told me he went, got acquainted with this rancher, and they wanted to get down in and check some things in these canyons and stuff or something with the rancher. And the rancher said, no, he wanted nothing to do with the old boy, see. Well, Ralph said that what happened, there was a fence or something broke down in one of these places. It took the guys a day to go around and go down and fix the fence, and then come back out. And Ralph said he would fly him down in. Well, Ralph did, and he said the rancher was so grateful. He said, hey, you want to prospect, go ahead, because he thought, put him down there in the morning and went back and got him.
Well, then, didn't he take men out there to shoot antelope out of the,
Yeah, shooting coyotes.
yeah?
Coyotes,
Oh, was it
yeah.
coyotes?
See,
I
at that
never
time,
seen
they
that.
were making a
Right.
lot of money on coyotes. And he decided, but it didn't work out too good. I guess he didn't get that. But anyway, the hides were really paying for money. And I know he told me about that. He was going to fly in.
You mentioned his back operation, he had that in Atlanta.
Well, I know he went to California and I thought he was sick then. And then he flew in Alaska, which I'm very vague about why he went to Alaska. I just remember in Atlanta, I was probably 12 or 10 or 11, and he was gone a lot.
He ferried planes into Alaska. This I know. He flew planes into Alaska. And I think, who else was, Mike or somebody? One of the other boys, I think, flew too. Or something. But anyway, Ralph flew planes into Alaska this time, that they needed planes up there. And it was just small planes. But then he would land on the Alaskan highway and fill up with gas at the service stations and then go on. So that's
This
it.
must have been a huge strain on the marriage. I know Mom was doing very kind of menial work.
Yeah.
She was a
yeah.
hostess at a Hojo's,
Yeah.
and
Oh,
she
yeah.
worked at Riches. And
The money was real tight, Ralph just,
Yeah, she even worked when she was up in Pleasantville.
She did.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
What did she
Yep.
do?
I can't remember where, I think she worked at a clothing store. Swanson's or something like that,
I don't know.
I think.
But Ralph was determined to be a flyer and a racer, and he did it on a shoestring, and maybe your family, he sacrificed a lot, but he was determined to do that, and he did it. That was his goal.
Well, yeah, I mean, we
He
didn't
become a
notice.
famous man, you know,
Yeah.
in the flying circles.
Right.
He did.
And Maggie, we don't have much time left, and we can go to a second tape if we choose, but your mom always felt very close to you, I know. And I think you felt the same way. Can you,
We had a lot of nice little chats.
Oh, yeah, she was a charming woman. She sure was. Tough lady.
She
And
would,
she had to be tough to put up with
yeah, and
that.
she would, you know, she would tell me all of her troubles, you know, all these things that were going on.
I'm glad
Boy,
she
she could
shared,
handle it, let me
Yeah.
tell you.
because she didn't tell us.
No,
Yeah.
I've only told Krista this, but I tell you, when he was having his back problems, I needed an operation, so my mother and dad asked me, you know, Ralph, put down, I loaned him $1,000. I didn't have $1,000, I had to go to the bank and sign it, see? Well, I never got anything back, but I never had mentioned it all those years because he had the family, he was having a hard time. And there was no way that I was ever going to say anything about it. And I never have. I still got that damn note. I still
Oh, do
got,
you?
oh, I still got it, yeah.
Oh, no.
I still got
I can
it.
imagine what it's worth now with
Yeah.
interest.
And I worked for the banker,
Yeah, she worked for
and,
me.
yeah, and he found out, he's
Oh,
the
we
guy
asked him.
he's the guy that lent Larry the money. Well, because I worked for him, when Mr. Hopkins wasn't too sure he wanted to get us in all that problem, so he come to me. And he said, Margaret, he said, I highly advise against this loan. But he said, if you want Larry to lend him that money, he said, I will sign it. And I said, well, it's like this. My dad helped us out. Larry would like to help somebody else out. So go ahead. And he said, all right. So we got
Yeah.